rolling. Welcome back again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. You, I think, came into this, right? Wanting to have something specifically to talk about?
Yeah,
something that came from Margie Camp?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that weren't at Margie Camp this year, we had, I feel like, a pretty good turnout of kids show up for the campfire talks.
Yep.
And one night I was talking about nutrition and kind of focusing on Margie specifically because sometimes that's the carrot that people need, right? Like they might not think about caring about their day-to-day nutrition.
Yep.
But when we talk about that green dot or feeling great for a race, that can be a really enticing opportunity for them to think about their nutrition and be open to trying different things and being curious about different ways of eating or fueling or hydrating or planning. And so what I find is that if you can kind of hook them in when talking about events and they notice the nutrition is positively impacting their training, that's when sometimes we get folks who think, wow, if it can do this for me on the trail, what can it do for me in my everyday life?
Yeah, I agree. The kids had a lot of questions at camp. And they had a lot of great questions. We had quite a few kids at camp last year. I think some came to the campfire talks, but it wasn't the same level of engagement from the kids last year.
Yeah.
It was definitely strong this year, which was nice to see. And I think the majority of their questions actually were all around food.
Yeah. And I mean, I should say, I was giving out nerd gummy clusters. So like that does help.
Sure.
But it wasn't like they were just asking a question to raise their hand and participate. Mm-hmm. They were actually thinking about stuff that they were maybe, seeing on the trail, challenges they were having. Like I felt like their questions were detailed, that they were thinking about an experience they had. Yeah. And those are completely two different types of questions.
It's interesting to me that nutrition, it seems a disconnect between nutrition for some people and the impact it has on the activities they're engaging in, whether it's mountain biking, running, or just day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But if you can make it more, if you can relate it to something else that they can understand, I mean, it would be like having a quarter tank of gas in your car and trying to drive to Chicago from Marquette. You're not going to make it.
No.
You need to put more gas in.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what food is. It's fuel.
Yeah.
And then you need the right fuel.
Well, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it kind of goes back to what we talked about when I was here last about people making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Right.
And I find, respectfully, as an adult and as a parent to 3 boys, it's usually the adults in the kid's life that's making it complicated or confusing.
Well, I mean, that's what adults are here for, right? It's to overcomplicate everything. So we'll dive in because I think that the gist of this is really trying to parse out nutrition for kids, right?
Yep.
I'll share one thing before I cut over to you is that I said at camp that I think is super important to remember is that if you're out doing events with kids, whether it's a 5K or the Crusher or Margie, things can go from really, really good to catastrophe in the snap of a finger.
Yeah.
And I'm sharing that because I've experienced it with my own son, where, he's trucking. I think of the 2022 Crusher. That was it is actually the only time I've ever done an event of ours where I stayed in it to the end. There's one other time that I jumped out because there were some safety concerns I had to take care of. But with Cable, we rode it together, the 40. And he got into that mode where we were close enough to the finish that he just wanted to be done. So we're hammering and he feels good and it's great. And then it's not great because he just bonked. He hit the wall and literally went from good to just crying.
Yeah.
Couldn't stop it. And immediately I'm just like, okay, continue to cry, please, and eat.
Yeah, let it out. Here's a snack.
And once he got some sugar back in him and he got some food, then he was good. It was literally like I flipped a switch, right? We flipped a switch. He immediately started crying like, it's the end of the world. And then food, flipped the switch. Good.
Back. Yep.
Back on, done.
Yeah.
Finished. That's how quick it changes. So it can happen that fast. And if you're a parent or just a person riding with a kid, you really need to be able to step back.
Yeah.
You need to not freak out.
Right.
You need to be able to read the room, read the trail, and just realize what's going on.
Yeah. And to have something available, like sometimes when you are bonking in that state, like you're crying and you're kind of just, your mind gets stupid because your body needs food.
Yep.
And so sometimes it's like they might not want something or nothing don't ask them what sounds good or what they want to eat. Just give them something and say, eat this. Simple directions.
That's exactly what I do with Cable. Eat this. You can cry, but eat this.
Yeah. And like I mentioned at camp, there's some type of like physiology that when you're bonking and your body needs carbohydrates in that kind of situation, light switch situation, the act of chewing can really help with blood sugar regulation. And so choosing something like of substance, like a granola bar, or even if it's some fruit or something like that they're actually chewing versus sipping on sports drink or say like taking a gel or something like that. So that's why it's important to keep some extra piece of food with them. That's what I always do. And that way you can kind of use that in an emergency.
Mm-hmm. So talk through, I guess, let's say the physiology for a child doing an event, whether it's just one of our events. If you have a kid and an adult and they're doing this event together, can you articulate for us how are those two people burning calories differently?
Yeah.
Like, because it seems like when I've been with Cable, he needs less. This is just him. I'm not saying this is a general rule. He doesn't want to eat a lot at one time, but he needs to keep it coming in more consistently.
Yeah.
Because he'll crush through calories faster. And if you get too much of a gap in time where he doesn't take it in, then the blood sugar drops and things go sideways.
Yeah.
But how do you handle this with a kid? Because it seems like kids need something different than adult does.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an adult, we've had, 40, 50, 60 plus years of regulating our hunger and appetite, and we're no longer in a period of growth. Like if we think about kids, they're constantly growing, especially if they're an adolescent, then they're really growing quickly. And so their hunger and fullness levels can change day to day, hour to hour. Whereas us as adults, ours are pretty like stable Mabel. And so we kind of have to factor that in when we're out riding with kids all day. And that's why, you may have a kid that's not hungry at breakfast and then he's super hungry at lunch or dinner or bedtime. And so just kind of like at home, you can kind of ride those ebbs and flows. And we have to be prepared for those ebbs and flows on the trail. And what you described is a great way to kind of account for those ebbs and flows is like kind of like letting them graze throughout the whole ride. And also making sure that it's food that they enjoy, food that they want to eat. And if it's, freeze-dried Skittles and Nerd Cluster gummies, I mean, still having, I remember bringing Uncrustables for Arthur for the mini Margie and packing an actual sandwich. We actually packed like a sandwich and chips. We packed a lunch to eat and sat on the trail and had lunch and then moved along. Whereas adults can go longer without, like they can take longer gaps in between nutrition. It's still important to fuel consistently, but we can head into an event with a pretty well topped off fuel source from say our pre-run or ride meal. And I feel like kids, their stomachs are smaller. They don't have a great sense of what they actually need to fuel that ride. So they might just eat their normal breakfast and think they're going to be fine. And that's why the grazing approach is really more helpful for them. They need food earlier. They also are more prone to dehydration. So in the hot and humid months, it's important. And they also just don't regulate those things as well. So reminders, you may think, oh, I shouldn't have to remind my 11-year-old to eat and drink, but they do need that reminder.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. They don't seem to handle heat nearly as well.
No.
you really have to be sensitive to heat, especially high heat.
Yeah.
What's the, a lot of times, I think you talked about it, Margie Camp, X number of grams of carbs for adults now.
Yeah.
Per hour. There's some target numbers that you give to adults to hit. Are they the same for kids? Are they different? How would you handle it with kids?
Yeah.
Or are there no numbers?
Yeah. So we don't have a lot of great research on like kids, especially kids who are doing hard things and self-supported events like this, which
Right.
I actually think is kind of rad, but it means that we have to kind of interpret the data that we have for adults and kind of think, well, what makes sense for kids? And so keeping in mind that this is also another place where individualized nutrition based on your kid and your experiences is also really important. Usually, like if we're talking an adult, we might, run anywhere from 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrate an hour, depending on the length of the event. And with a kid, especially in that kind of grazing, I would try to aim for more like 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour and keep it like shorter intervals between. An adult might eat something every 30 to 45 minutes. A kiddo might be eating something everywhere from, say, 20 to 30 minutes.
Is there anything that you shouldn't give a kid during an endurance event? What about, where are you at on caffeine?
Yeah. Caffeine, obviously the big concern with parents and caffeine is stunted growth. My husband's 6'2". My kids are super tall. I'm not worried about caffeine. I don't just like let them drink caffeine all day, every day. But if a kid wants a mini can of Coke on the side of the trail during an event, if they're choosing a hydration with caffeine or like energy chews with caffeine, they're not eating those every day. They're eating them while training. They're eating them while on the event. But that's not to say, if you have a kiddo with a heart issue or one that's, if you have a history of being caffeine sensitive, then that's maybe something you would choose to avoid.
Are they going to have the same reaction to caffeine than an adult does? Will it be more because they're a kid, less?
Yeah. I mean, dose might be, more. You could say, I think a lot about just like body weight, right? Like if you have a kid who's half your size, you give them the same dose of caffeine. I really shy away from one thing I would not give a kid during a race is an energy drink, right? Like if it's something from, like I make these matcha granola balls, like I'm not going to worry about the caffeine and green tea of like a matcha when they're eating it and something like that.
Yeah.
Cliff Bar makes like a caffeinated granola bar now.
Cliff Bar does?
Yeah, it just came out.
Interesting.
So some of those things, like I probably wouldn't plan to pack those for my kids, but if that was the difference between them eating something caffeinated on the ride and them not eating at all, then I'm going to give them the caffeine. But Arthur we were out for roughly 8 hours for the mini Margie last year. And I wish I could have like stole some of his energy levels. Like he didn't get any caffeine and kids just run at a different energy level than parents do. But if he were biking the 50 and it was dark, and I mean, that would be a strategy that we would have to figure out in training and talk to him about.
Thinking back to that crusher for cable, this is just, it's fascinating to me what kids are capable of doing. He does that event, I think it was like 50 miles. It wasn't 40, it was 50 or something like that. Maybe it was 48. He had that bad moment, right? Where it just destroyed. Then you give him some sugar, some gummy worms, and some food, and he's back up top rolling. When he got back to camp, as soon as he crossed the finish line, it's like the fact that he had just done 50 miles was erased from his memory. His body had no recollection that he had just done this. And he was up till 3, 4 in the morning, Sunday morning, like a banshee. Finally, Stacy and I were like, oh my God, our kid is still up running around the campground. So they're just, that high energy aspect of children is just, it is pretty fascinating that when you put them into environments that aren't constantly trying to throttle their capabilities and tell them what they can and can't do, and you just let them roam freely and run freely to show you what they can do. Yeah. And they're put into an empowering environment to sort of push a little bit, but not in a competitive way, just to live life way.
Yeah.
they have endless bounds of energy.
They do.
I mean, they will run laps around the adults at camp, right? He's up at 3 and he's like unfazed while all the adults are cashed out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's not just Cable, like all those kids that are there. There were other kids running around too. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And like the next day, right, when most people are like struggling to get out of their tent or cabin or wherever they're sleeping. And these kids are just like, they could just do it all over again.
Just boom, open their eyes and it's on.
I love that for them.
Yeah. What about going into an event? I think that this had come up at Margie Camp. You know, the adults are talking about, because nutrition may be more for adults, maybe not. Coming into an event, it's like we talked about at camp. You can't just make nutrition a priority the day of the event.
Yep.
Like nutrition should be a life priority.
It should be.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if performing well in a race matters to you, then why doesn't performing well on a Monday for your family matter to you?
Yeah.
and if nutrition's the key, why aren't you doing it all the time? But I am curious for kids, is there anything you could tell parents and other people, like leading up to the event that week of, that is there anything they should be doing?
Yeah. Definitely including the kids in planning of their nutrition for the event. So not trying to spring on new foods, like not trying a bunch of new recipes, maybe making some foods that are familiar, asking them, you know, what do you want to have for dinner this week? What sounds good the night before the race, or what sounds good morning of breakfast? Mm-hmm. Making something that's portable, especially if you're driving to the race in the morning, that you can, you know, you're not angry if your kid's like eating something in the car. Making sure it's a good source of carbs. And, you know, like sometimes Arthur will want to have like a big bowl of yogurt with berries. Right. And it's like, that wouldn't be the best choice for, you know, morning of Margie, because there's just not quite enough, a little too heavy on the dairy. And he doesn't have any like issues or food allergies, and just not quite enough carbs. So we're thinking like,
yeah, that makes sense.
Pancakes, waffles, think of like protein and fat as like the salt and pepper on your breakfast. Yeah. Bagels, things like that, some fruit, and have something that you can eat modularly, so that if that kind of like, if you leave the house and the race doesn't start for 2 hours, we'll kind of remember that grazing attitude of like, hey, can we bring something with that they could eat, you know, 30 to 60 minutes before the race? Yep. And something that's familiar and that they'll be willing to eat. Because I like to believe that everybody has a little bit of race nerves on race morning.
Yeah. Anxiety, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you just kind of feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to eat this. And kids have that too. So we talk about that. Like, this is a normal thing that happens, but like we still have to make sure that we're eating and we're ready for the day. But yeah, including kids on meals, especially in a race that has the potential to be hot and humid. If you're eating out more, those foods tend to be higher in sodium, and just really monitoring like hydration and making sure that they're kind of eating their normal meal pattern. If you usually eat out a lot, then, I mean, can kind of continue your status quo. But race week can be busy. And so trying to set yourself up for success as a family can really help your kid go into the event being well fueled and well hydrated.
What is the recommendation, if there is one, or what would you suggest as far as electrolyte tabs are considered for kids?
Yeah. It's a little, again, it's like the research is a little bit hard because like most parents don't want their kids to be in research studies. It's a little more ad lib or according to the environment. When I use the same like capsules, they don't make like electrolyte capsules for kids, but the same electrolyte, like the salt stick capsules that I take myself, I give to my kids. And some of it might just be more preference. Like you might have a kiddo that can't swallow a capsule, but some companies make like fast dissolving. They're almost like sweet tarts. Yeah. And so the cool thing about those is they're actually half the sodium. So you can kind of give them, and then just really seeing the kids, like, you know, if a kid's not feeling well, giving them one instead of like maybe as an adult, you take 3, right? So just being mindful, starting off with less and starting earlier than, you know, trying to get ahead of it. Because like you said, with Cable, like bonking or just with like dehydration. But even though they're a little more apt to be dehydrated, it's kind of amazing because during the mini Margie this year, I considered my husband and I, now we were registered for the race, but this was Arthur's race and we were on course support. We were doing it with him. And I was the bike Sherpa. I had 2 liters of water in my frame bag and I carried that the whole way because it was really hot and humid and I wanted to make sure that we had enough water.
Yeah.
There were lots of trail angels and support stations out. It was kind of overwhelming. So anytime we would stop, I would fill up my water. When we got home, Arthur had only drank 500 milliliters out of his 1.5 liter pack over 8 hours.
Wow.
And I know that the reason he felt so good is because I was giving him electrolyte capsules like a drug dealer.
Yeah.
And so because I knew how hot and humid it was, and my husband kind of like reminded Arthur of that, like, hey, looks like you need to be more mindful of drinking when you're riding. And he was like, it's a good thing mom gave you all those electrolyte capsules because...
What capsule, like what brand, what was in the capsule?
Yeah. So salt sticks, which is...
Does it like make sodium and potassium?
Yep. A little bit of magnesium.
Yeah.
Yep. So the capsules that you swallow are like 215 milligrams of sodium.
Yeah.
I was giving him the dissolvable ones, which are like 105 milligrams of sodium. And so when we would stop, I would just like give him one, and that kind of helped keep him where he needed to be.
Yeah.
Despite really not drinking. I guess he did have 2 bottles on his water bottle as well. So it's not counting, like he had electrolytes in like a scratch hydration in his bottle, and he has a few other things on him. But just goes to show it's like, yeah, we can say all these things are great, and we can say that, you know, they're at risk for dehydration, but they are really resilient. But it's making sure that you have something that meets their needs, especially when you're on the trail with them or they're doing an event.
Yeah, we had good luck with cable with, I can't remember, Rocket Lights, I think is what it's called, from Carbo Rocket. And it's basically like maybe probably once an hour is generally the frequency.
Yep.
Just one tab. You know, take a drink, take one of these, and it really does make a big difference.
It does.
I don't think there's any caffeine in.
Yeah, you can buy the salt stick capsules with caffeine, but these were the non-caffeinated ones. I like to keep my caffeine separate.
Yeah.
It also helps if you have a kid who doesn't care for like sports drinks. I have a kiddo who prefers just water. And so when we get into a hot and humid environment, it can be really, like if they don't like a Scratch or a Gatorade or anything like that. So those capsules are really helpful because we were out on a family ride and we were riding up the grinder and he threw his bike down, crying, made a bit of a scene.
Yeah.
And I literally had that moment of like, I think you need some more electrolytes. So I gave him a couple of capsules and then he was like, he perked right up and he was like, Mom, that really helped. I was like, well, great.
You mentioned having the kids part of the nutrition planning, you know, like coming into an event, and probably would say that just for day-to-day life in general, right? The other thing, I think that Gabe had brought this up because Gabe was at camp with his son. And I mentioned this at camp too. Or maybe I mentioned it in a podcast. I don't remember now. But it was cool. I was talking to Gabe. This is one of the evenings after we had got done with the campfire talks, and his son came over. And I had just witnessed this exchange between the two of them. His son was asking him a couple questions, and then Gabe's quizzing his son back. You know, do you got this ready? You got that ready? They're kind of going through this checklist of things that his son's responsible for having ready for himself. And they had this great interaction, and then Gabe's like, yeah, great job. And then his son ran off. And I just remember thinking, like, preparation is such an important part of life. And it's something, it's like a skill you can absolutely develop, but you have to practice it. And when you're trying to teach preparation to children, it's incredibly frustrating. I say that in a fun way, because as you're teaching preparation and trying to impart the importance of it, you do have to also remember where they're at.
Yeah.
Developmentally.
Yep.
Right? They're still kids. So they're not, what I'd say is they absolutely should be part of the process of getting their own stuff ready, being responsible for their own stuff. And you should also remember that you as a parent are going to have to be overwatch on it. They're going to miss stuff. They're going to screw stuff up. They're going to be kids. It's not that they're a bad kid.
Yep.
It's not that they're not listening to you. It's not that they're failing. It's that they're literally a kid.
Yeah.
And just continuing to maintain in a non-judgmental way, because, I think as a parent, if you start getting pissed off and you're yelling and it becomes this point of contention and argument, you're actually probably going to inversely make the kid disinterested in doing this with you.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's going to want to remove, or she's going to want to remove this negative interaction.
Yeah.
So just make this habit building process of preparation a fun part of life. And, when they miss stuff or forget stuff, again, I hate to use the example, but mine is cable. I know it is inevitable that he's not going to do something he knows he should do and that I've told him to do. And I'm going to anticipate that. And I'm going to have him covered.
Yep.
And we're going to have a moment and we're going to chuckle about it when that moment comes up. And he's like, oh, I forgot my water bottles. And I'm like, Dad didn't.
Yep.
But then you have that conversation and it's just constantly building them up, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But they have to be part of it.
And that's also positive for them. Like, the kids need to learn and be prepared, obviously. But absolutely, they also, like, we can say all day, like, I support you, I'm here for you. But feeling that support when you forget something, when your kiddo forgets something and you say, yeah, I got you.
Yes.
That's the moment where they feel your support. Not this, you're learning a hard lesson of, okay, riding without water in 90 degrees is not safe, right? Like, that's just not a safe situation.
Right.
And when Arthur showed up for his first MCIC practice, he had gotten all his stuff ready. And we showed up and his pack was leaking. His Camelback was leaking. And I was like, Bud, like, what's going on? And we, double checking his water. It just didn't get tightened on. It's like an older Camelback and they're annoying to thread. So I got it back on and I'm like, oh, are you going to have enough water? Like, we were having that back and forth of problem solving what the situation, what happened.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, it should be fine. So I pulled out the bladder from the bag and showed him, and he had this much left. Right. And he, the look on his face was just he was just jazzed to be there. Like, he's been looking forward to practicing with them since they started, since they began. And so I literally was I had my Hydro Flask in the car. And I was just like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of my water and I'm going to pour it in there. So I know he has an extra liter of water to head out.
Yep.
And yeah, you got it covered. And again, that thanks mom. Thank you, mom. And covering it for them.
Builds trust.
It does. It does. One thing that we do, and it comes from, I don't know if I mentioned this. I don't think I mentioned this at Margie Camp, but there's a kind of a famous person in the nutrition world. Her name is Ellen Satter, and she believes in the division of responsibility when it comes to feeding kids. And there's lots of, kind of levels to her philosophy from early feeding all the way through teens. And the one thing that I really like, and I feel like I'm always mentioning, is that division of responsibility, which you as the parent are responsible for what's in the house and what's being offered. And then the kid is responsible for how much they eat and what they eat. And that's a little bit more from a day-to-day standpoint.
Yeah.
But one thing we do in our family, which helps with the preparation and helps the kids prepare for their rides and their practices and family rides or whatever we're doing, baseball practice, is we have a snack counter or pantry.
Yep.
And it's got 6 little plastic baskets in it. And one half of it is sports nutrition products. And whether it's Scratch Hydration or Honey Stinger waffles or Scratch Energy Chews. So all the things that my husband and I feel comfortable allowing our kids to have when they're biking. And if you're not into those products, obviously as a sports dietitian, I have relationships with these companies, I can get these things at, a cheaper cost and things like that. But it could be graham crackers and applesauce and fruit snacks. Those are all really great options for kids to fuel. It could be dried fruit, granola bars. Yep. And so then the other side of that pantry is usually filled with snacks that my kids would use to bring to school so that they can be self-sufficient when they're packing their snacks for school. But in the summer, we kind of transition to more real food options for them to bring on rides or to practice. And so when we're asking them, we're providing them, we're deciding what's being offered and we're making it available to them. And then when they know, hey, I got to pack a snack for baseball or for Adventure Bike Club tonight,
Yep.
they know what's available. And if, someone tries to take Scratch Energy Chews to school, which has happened, I'm like, nope, that's for like on the trails or something like that. And so we kind of reinforce those boundaries and because they are more expensive. They do cost more.
Yeah.
And then letting kids pick and choose what they're going to choose to have.
Yeah, it's kind of, what you're describing as I listen to you talk about that is sort of like you're developing your family culture, and readiness is part of your family culture, and preparation is part of family culture, and shared responsibility and shared accountability is part of the family culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that's universal, whether you're a parent in the house or a child.
Yep.
And it's cool. I'm assuming, I haven't asked you this explicitly and gotten a straight answer on it, but I'm assuming through listening that it seems like for you guys, I think that you're similar to the way we do it in our house, where it's the parents aren't taking a position of hierarchical. Stacy and I are not the president and the vice president of the United States of the Pokettes.
Right.
I look at us more with the kids on an equal plane.
Yeah.
We're in this together.
Yep.
I don't pull the I'm the dad card ever. That's old school. I heard it a lot. But that doesn't exist. And I feel like when I listen to you talk about, your kids, you and your husband and your family, it feels very similar.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of at the same level and expectations are universal.
Yep.
So, and you're not just telling the kids, you're not just teaching preparation and readiness. You're also embodying it.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, and this probably still does happen, I think sometimes parents will teach one thing to the kids, but they're doing a different thing.
Yeah.
So when that's happening now, you are layered.
Yeah.
Now there is sort of, I'm the boss telling you what you should do and the way things should be, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm dad.
Yeah.
Or I'm mom.
And that modeling piece is really important especially for nutrition and kids up to age like preteens. So like 10, 11, that's really the time we have as parents to model the expectations and their relationship with food, because that's the ages that kids actually look to us as adults. Mm-hmm. And they're not looking for what you're saying. They're watching you for what you're doing. Yeah.
We've talked about this a lot at Bike Club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you're not doing it, or say you have different nutritional goals or habits than what you hope your kid would, there's a lot, I talk a lot to clients, or if I'm working with kids, to, parents and their kiddos, about trying to get the family unit on one page. And like you said, I love that thought of like the family culture, mm-hmm. right? Like around responsibility, whether it's around food or chores or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I do say that to my boys. I remember, asking for help recently and saying, I was getting a little bit of grief and saying like, yeah, it's a lot. It's also a lot for one person. And I know that you wouldn't be excited to do this all yourself. So please don't expect me to.
Right. Exactly.
And then they're like, sorry, mom. And then mm-hmm. they go and do what's that. And again, I always say I'm an expert in feeding kids up till age 11 because my oldest son's 11.
Right.
I work with a lot of middle schoolers because they are in that age of transition they're in this kind of lovely developmental spot. I feel like they have a lot of questions. They have a lot of curiosities. And this is where their modeling changes from their adults in their life to their peers. And so that middle school age is really a great opportunity where I feel like they do have questions about nutrition. They're thinking about their food choices differently, how it impacts their life, maybe how it impacts their body or their shape and size. Mm-hmm. They're growing, so their bodies are changing. Mm-hmm. And then moving forward as teenagers, they really model their food choices after their peers. So when we can kind of approach teams of kiddos or groups of kids, that can be really a great opportunity to help them with those curiosities and just learning different tools and strategies than maybe what was modeled to them earlier in their childhood.
Here's what I can tell you about the gap from 11, your oldest, to 21, my oldest. They eat a hell of a lot more. It's way more expensive.
It is. I feel like we're already, once our kids moved out of like the kids meal, you know, when you're like going out to eat and you're like, oh my gosh.
I'm going to say this, and I would think other parents are going to be like, yeah, we hear the same thing. You know, you put Cable and Gavin on the refrigerator after Stacy comes home, and within 24 hours, they both open the door and they're like, there's no food in the house. And there's food.
Yeah.
But they've eaten everything that they want to eat.
Yep.
And now the only thing that's left is stuff they don't want to eat.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, you're including them in, like, when I'm planning meals for the week, asking the kids like, hey, what do you want for dinner this week? And it's so fun to see the kids kind of light up about, you know, when we're having the meal that they picked. Like my youngest really loves to help in the kitchen. I was putting like shredded beef to go this morning in a crock pot, and it did take more time, but like he wanted to help with all of the spices. And I had to just give myself a minute to be like, this is good. He can, you know, season beef shoulder as a 5-year-old. These are life skills that will really help him in the future.
Does he like beef shoulder?
He does. Yeah. He likes pretty much all food, but he's also, you know, at 5, their taste buds change so rapidly, but that's also like they get a little bit of an attitude about it where they could have something they've eaten 100 times. Yeah. And then one day they're like, this is horrible. I don't want it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Question. You guys were at Bike Club yesterday or Monday, right? Yeah.
Lars and Jordan were.
Yeah. How'd that go with the storm coming in?
Well, Lars told me that most kids aren't allowed in the trailer, but that he was allowed to go in the trailer because Jordan
Did you give Lars an MVP pass?
Well, yeah, I guess I couldn't pick your son out, Lars out necessarily, but if he said he got into the trailer, he was offered an additional snack as well.
Yeah, so my husband was out on the trail biking and got the notice that we were ending late. So he hightailed it back as quick as he could and was like, well, Lars was one of the last kids to get picked up. And then, Lars was like stoked. He's like, I got to go in the trailer.
Yeah, so I guess it was Mark and some of the other Bike Club staff and some of the kids in there. How did Lars handle the thunder and the wind? He didn't care? No,
he didn't care. And as a kid, it's so funny because at home, I'm not a huge fan of storms. Yeah. Neither is he. He gets that from me. And I really don't try to like make a big deal about it. I'm just kind of like keep it to myself. Mm-hmm. So he's the one that will like, if it's thundering during the night, he will end up in our bed because he's nervous.
Sure.
But I feel like outside, he's just like, this is great. Mm-hmm. And we heard from one of the leaders in his group that Lars, they were like, he's so brave. He's first to volunteer for everything. But you remember, like, I've been taking him biking since he was very, very little.
Oh, yeah.
Like like 3.5. He's been out on the trails. Yep. And he gets a lot of attention. He got a lot of attention then because he was so tiny. And but when you're constantly chasing after your older brothers, like we had to like upgrade bikes for him because we didn't have a bike that didn't have the coaster brakes. Yeah. Because like we needed him to be able to do level pedals. And, you know, we had to buy a toe strap for him so that we can go do like downhill stuff. And he's living his best life as the third boy in our house.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you recall, are there any questions that came up at Margie Camp from the kids that you think would be particularly important to share here for somebody that would listen to this?
Yeah.
I can't recall specifically all the questions. I just know there were a lot of them.
Yeah. So there was, I think the one that we already covered was Gabe had asked, like, you know, what are the differences between adults and kids? And we covered that. The kids stuff was a little more specific to like event morning or race morning. One kiddo had shared like, hey, I get a little bit like nervous belly, like, you know, butterflies. And so we talked about eating foods that are familiar, foods that, again, you can kind of eat modularly. So kind of like, you know, if you make yourself like a big omelet or something that you have to like sit down at a table, it's not as portable.
Yeah, right.
And especially for parents and kiddos who are coming from out of town, consider your arrangements for where you're staying. Are you camping? Are you staying in an Airbnb? Are you staying at a hotel? The hotel buffet may or may not be an option depending on what race you're doing. So getting your kid familiar with something that you can take with you.
Yeah.
I've heard of a lot of people for the 100 will drive to Forestville and get a parking spot and then make themselves breakfast and coffee in the parking lot at Forestville.
That makes sense because how early you got to get there.
Yeah. Yep.
They're starting at 7:30.
Yep.
And it's a shit show.
Right.
For parking.
Yeah. So a lot of the questions were more kind of those sticky points in nutrition, whether it's training, heat, humidity, nervousness, and honestly, just coming down to giving your kids the space and the opportunity to work the solution. Like you said, staying calm with them if they're bonking, not yelling at them, providing them with electrolytes if they're, and I think to myself with Arthur only drinking a third of his hydration bladder, next year maybe we'll work on some different cues for that him and Jordan can rely on.
Right.
But maybe the conditions will be different. Maybe it won't be as hot and humid.
Yeah, it might be cool.
Yeah, it might be cold.
What about post-event? Is there anything that parents should prioritize or that the kids should prioritize post-event after it's done? Or is it just important just to get food, have a balanced meal, hydrate, et cetera?
Yep. Just whatever they want kind of a thing. And that's not saying you had to earn your cheat meal, right? As adults, we kind of get into all that diet culture, wellness BS.
Yeah.
But it's more just whatever sounds good to them. And if they are in a space where they're nothing sounds good, I don't really feel good, then as the adult making the decision of think about what do they normally like? If it's Domino's pizza, go get them Domino's pizza. If it's, not forcing them to eat some weird thing that they don't like. I remember Arthur just not really caring. He wanted he's I'll just eat a peanut butter and jelly. And we're no, we're going to pick you up food on the way home. And sometimes even having a plan before the race so that you can, if they're, running around the campsite with friends or if they're just not feeling their best self, you can just make sure that hey, we're going to get pizza like we talked about. And just pushing on hydration and whether it's, something that they like to drink. I mean, Arthur doesn't drink Sprite daily, but he likes a Sprite. So it's great. Let's have that. If there was only Coke available, I would let him have a Coke. I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, some food is preferable.
Days after the event, does their appetite and metabolism stay ramped up like it does a lot of times for adults?
Yeah. And sometimes if they're in a period of growth, it might even exacerbate it. So that's just something to be mindful of. Kind of what I mentioned about the week leading into, keep sticking to familiar foods and foods they like. Make sure you have some good, again, familiar options, foods that they like leading after the race. And it may sound like I'm saying, oh, tailor your whole life to a trail. I'm not saying that because I definitely don't do that. But you can definitely take, say, a week and a half to 2 weeks around the event, 1 week prior and 1 week post, and really just tailor to your kids' food preferences. That's the best way to go.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, then.
Well, that was loud.
It was.
Are you putting something together?
I am.
For kids?
I am.
Or for parents for kids?
Yes.
Okay.
It's called The Self-Supported Kid. So it's a workbook. So parents and kids can work together on their nutrition plan for the race.
So I guess talk through it. Give a preview on it.
Yeah.
What is it? And when will it be out?
Yep. So it is originally going to come out as an ebook where people can print it off. But I am going to get, because it is a workbook. And I mean, I love pen and paper and all of that. So I'm going to look at getting some printed once it's kind of been out in the world.
Yep.
So there will be some stuff in there about day-to-day nutrition, kind of if parents are completely lost, what to focus on. Because as we mentioned, that is such a big part of it. What should you care about as an adult? kind of that hierarchy of like making sure your kids are getting enough food. And then you're looking at like the timing of meals and snacks. And then the last thing we're kind of worried about is like what they're eating. I have parents whose kids are like underweight or they're having growth issues or energy issues. And the parents are so concerned about the like meticulous food choices that it's like, okay, like we can worry about that. But now it's just to worry about like quantity of food or the amount of calories over the quality or what they're eating. So go through that a little bit, lean very heavily on food preferences for kids. So think of like, you know, some of the things I mentioned in that snack drawer that we have at home. So kids can go through with their adult or on their own if they can read well and like mark off like what things do I like? And then that gives the parents an opportunity if they're making a list or they're looking a snack to be like, hey, I can get these 6 things at the grocery store and make that snack bin or drawer for my kid or our household. And then also looking at like how to plan your nutrition. So very similarly to what I work with adults. So that kind of base nutrition, but with kiddos, it might be, okay, what are they eating every 15 or 20 minutes? And then if that changes, that's okay. But you're kind of planning, kind of like what you said Gabe and his son were doing out loud, but like on paper. And then, okay, what real food are they going to have on the trail? You know, whether it's lunch or a meal or something like that. Planning out a source of electrolytes. Kind of just going through what I believe are the staples to any nutrition plan that they should be going with. But think of it as like a kid could also do this on their own, my hope is. And then looking at where are these things going to be kept? Because I also think it's very important for kids to know where these foods and things are. So Arthur's going to help me draw some pictures and we're going to do, you know, like what's going to be in your top 2 bag, what's going to be, so not only what are you bringing, but where is it going?
Yeah. Where's it on the bike?
Yep.
That makes sense.
And then just a little bit of like race goals. I think it's important to like acknowledge that. So especially if like you and your kid have like a different idea of goals, some strategies, like you said, for like bonking, right? Like what's going to be around, what's going to be available. And then the hope is too, like a little note to parents as far as like, now that you know all your kids' food preferences, it's your job to have some of these extra things with you. Like I said, I carried 2 liters of water for the whole mini Margie. Yeah. And we never ended up needing it, thankfully. Right. So yeah, lots of interaction, lots of information for parents, and then ways that it can be applied to have a great race.
And they'll get it where? On the website?
Yep, on my website. There's a storefront.
Yeah. What is the website address?
Yeah, it's www.restoreasedietetics.com.
Okay. You can link that right when we're done in the show notes.
Yep. So
that's very cool.
And it's going to be like event neutral, I would say. So it's something you could use for Crusher coming up, EX or Mass Start, Margie, Polar Roll. And I'm already planning a second edition. So I'm like, I just got to get it out there so people can utilize it.
Yeah.
And then
the second edition would be what?
Oh, I just already have some thoughts on like, I know lots of folks who are parents, adults and kiddo duos that are going out. I'd love to get some quotes from kids and be able to share like what worked for them and just kind of make it a little bit more, kid friendly, kid centered. And that's a little bit hard to do from an adult mind, but I'm going to try my very best.
You can get in touch with it. You got 3 kids.
Yeah.
They can give you some content for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are either one of them or any of them doing the Crusher?
No. Arthur, we talked about it. I do think that Arthur would really enjoy it. I don't want to speak for him. I don't recall the reason that he didn't decide to do it this year.
Yeah. That's totally fine.
My husband, Jordan, really loves, I think he doesn't like people on the trail. I almost said he doesn't like people. That's
so not necessarily a Mass Start.
Yes. So we've talked about, like, I really think he would love, I think he would be all about an EX Crusher. So that's something that we, I've considered, and I think Arthur could do really well and would really enjoy something like that.
Have you taken him bike packing? Has he done any of that?
Not yet.
No.
Nope.
That's an interesting experience. Cable and I have done that, and that's fun.
Yeah.
That's a good time.
We've done a lot of like, it's not the same, but like van life stuff where you're, surfing on the coast of California and literally you have your van and surfboards, and which is just a wild experience. But
yeah, I'm trying to think. Cable and I did, what was the last one we did? End of 2023, we, actually that one ended up being just a catastrophe because the temperature ended up being like 100 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
Through Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
It was brutal. We biked to Laughing Whitefish Falls.
Okay.
And we fished there. Didn't catch anything. We ended up having to go back.
Yeah.
We ended up actually camping in the backyard at home just because of how the temps were not good.
Yeah.
He was not handling it well. I don't think anybody would have handled it well.
No.
It was that brutally hot. The one thing I was remembering is his first time that we went bike packing. I think I told you that story, hey, with the horse trails. Mm-hmm. We went over by Pine Martin Run. He's 8 now at this time, or 9. Had never been bike packing. It wasn't super long. I think in 2 days we did like 29 miles.
Yeah.
But, oh my God, horse trails. I don't recommend riding on horse trails. It was a sufferfest.
Yeah.
And he had some moments because it also got blazing hot middle of the afternoon,
Yeah.
But he recovered from it. He ended up having a great time throwing rocks in the water and stuff. But the one thing for him in that ride that was really interesting to see by the end was that I had set him up with his bike so that he was carrying what I thought was reasonable for him to carry for himself. So he had all of his food and his nutrition and his hydration was there. Everything he needed was there, available to him. And then I had him carry like his sleeping pad was like literally zip tied to the front of his handlebars. And then I gave him a seat pack. So he had like a couple different articles of clothing.
Yeah.
So he kind of felt like he was, self-contained. But then I had all the tent and stuff. But that experience for him was big because even though he wasn't carrying all of his stuff, he still had certain responsibility.
Yeah.
And he knew what he was responsible for and that he actually was responsible for something. It isn't like he was on this adventure and had nothing to be responsible for. And I just feel like it really, in that particular ride and rides after that, he was more invested in it because he played an active part in it besides just riding his bike.
Yeah. He didn't just hop on his bike and be like, Dad, got it all sorted out.
Exactly. Like, did he have a ton of gear? No. But I mean, at 8 or 9 years old, they can't carry a lot of gear. Their bike's too small.
Yeah.
I literally did have to zip tie his sleeping pad to his handlebars because, you can't put a bunch of packs on it.
Yeah. We had a very similar approach to Arthur with the Mini last year. And I remember, so I always carry a small pocket knife with me when I'm riding.
Yep.
And I'm always I like to make checklists and spreadsheet, like all the things. I have it all planned out. It's all on a table. And so he kind of has watched that experience, through Crusher EX and Master Crusher. And he was trying to lobby for Garmin, a bike computer, when we were doing the Mini last year.
Yeah.
I was like, no, dude, like, I understand they like look really cool, but they're also expensive, right?
Yeah.
But it was great to see that he was very interested in the gear and in the purpose for it. So I remember he carried his own pocket knife because he had gotten one for Christmas and he was very excited about carrying his own knife. Did we need it? No. But just that, and he had very similarly, like he had a little bag underneath his saddle. He was carrying all of his nutrition and the stuff that he needed for the day. I may have had his rain jacket, but I mean, he had pretty much everything else for him. Obviously it's different than bike packing, but I do think that I think that's one of the best ways that we can empower kids to do hard things is, like being a partner in the preparation and the modeling, but then also like knowing the level of like their governor, right? Like as a kid, like they can't hold the full pack. If you would have loaded up Cable's bike with all of his stuff, right? I don't know that you would have gotten very far. And I know Table's tough as nails, right?
Yeah.
And then again, you're in this situation where you're taking the fun out of it by not acknowledging that they're a kid.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah.
On the whole knife thing, I mean, I think the more common approach right now is that, adults across the world think that we should just eradicate all knives from, kids' lives.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they shouldn't be around a knife, they're a kid. Or you could do it, what you're doing, and we've also done the same thing. I mean, Cable has multiple pocket knives. He has hatchets.
Yep.
Was he swinging a hatchet alone when he was 5? Absolutely not. He wanted to.
We want him to have all of his digits, right?
He definitely wanted to. But, it's as much about just teaching them how to safely use these things.
Yeah.
And how to use them as a tool and how to not use them.
And they need reiterations of those reminders. And I think sometimes it's really easy as us. We feel like we want them to be independent, but then it's hard to remember that they still are kids.
Yeah.
And I've had to interject and remind my husband, still a kid, still a kid. And I've had to remind myself of that too. But it's great when kids can see, the community around these events. And I know that community was a big thing that drew Arthur to wanting to do the race.
Yep.
Now, granted, anyone could say, walking into our home, my son Lars was at preschool the day after Margie when I did the 50 bike. And I had gifted the boys all support crew shirts that year so they could wear them to the race.
Yeah, I remember that.
And my husband went to go pick up our youngest. And the teacher was like, "Oh my gosh, did you do the Margie?" And my husband was like, "No, my wife did." And then there was an event the next week. So then all the teachers are all talking to me about the Margie. And my kids wear those shirts all the time. They're always wearing their Margie shirts. They're always getting comments and things like that. So don't get me wrong, having a parent who's doing these events and putting in the work and training and stuff, I know that plays a role in it too.
Yeah.
But having them the boys and I were at a friend's house. I was supposed to ride the EX Crusher yesterday with a group. I was supposed to be one of 10.
Yep.
And I wasn't able to ride yesterday. So the older boys and I were all at one of the person's camp. So whatever, Crusher Eve, we had tacos, sauna swim, the whole 9 yards. And I was changing and I came back out and Caitlin, who was riding, said, "Yeah, Arthur offered to crew for us tomorrow." And I'm like, "Yeah, he said you and him are going to come out and crew for us." And I was like, "Well, I would really love that. I have something else I have to do tomorrow." Right. And so I love that not only is he wanting to do these events, but he's seeing the value in all of the things that it entails.
Yeah.
So being a race participant, he's also thinking about the support crew that's there supporting the racers.
Yep.
And I hope that in some, future years, I wouldn't be surprised if he wanted to coach at Margie Camp this year. And I'm like, dude, you're 11. But I could also see him wanting to come and help out suffer crew. And I think that's so great for kids to really see all the different ways that you can be involved and also to feel what it's like to be on to be on the trail, to be a part of a support crew, eventually be on the suffer crew. I'm really glad that he has that interest and that he gets that experience.
Yeah, the suffer crew aspect of our events is a really important part, and we've gone to great lengths to prioritize and communicate the value of what a support crew brings to an event on an equal footing with participants. And I think that that's very unlike most events.
Yeah.
Most events, it's all about the participant, the people doing it, and everybody who's there supporting them is an afterthought. And it has always really pissed me off because we're not doing any of this stuff without support crews. You're
Yeah.
not doing any of this without volunteers.
Yeah.
This does not exist. Like this whole experience is not anything without them.
Yeah.
And I think to your point with kids, this is critical for them to see a community and to have an organization that is teaching people to value being both a participant and a support crew. Because when you're a participant, that's self-serving.
Yeah.
And when you're a support crew, you're in service to others. And both are equally important.
Yeah.
And you just don't see a lot of that.
No.
You know, when you go to, I was coaching travel ball, right?
Yeah.
I think the third tournament we were at, the kids are just kind of lackadaisical in the first day, not playing to their potential. And I kind of got into them a little bit. And I'm like, do you understand the sacrifice that goes into making this happen for you? Do you know for 3 months, Coach Brian and I are giving our time that we don't have much of to you? And you guys are in here nonchalant, not looking like you give a shit. Your parents are shelling out thousands of dollars a weekend to get you here.
Yeah.
I don't hear as much of that in the competitive arena, because I think what happens a lot of times in the competitive arena is the kids get served. Everybody's there catering to the kids.
Yeah.
That's very self-serving.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of community service over in the competitive arena.
Yeah.
So I'm with you that is awesome to hear that Arthur is as stoked to go be there for somebody else to do something hard and to have an experience as he would be for himself. And
Yeah.
I hope that we can continue to stoke that fire in people.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough of it.
Well, and I completely missed the fact that, so he has been part of the Suffer crew, because when I was at the support station for the Polar Roll Ultra this year at Lake Levasseur, my husband came by to drop something off. Don't recall what it was. My older two, so Arthur and Titus, grabbed their stuff and ran out of the car. And they're like, we're staying with mom. And they, did they last all night? Not both of them, right? Did I have like expectations? Like, no, they were there. They were helpful. They were, and because they want to.
Yeah.
They wanted to cheer on the riders. And like, yes, it's fun. There's food. There's people. We were sliding down the hill, right? There's a fire. Arthur stayed until 11:30 when we saw Nick come through.
Yeah.
Granted, he fell asleep in my car, but again, he's a kid, right? I was like, I'm going to let you sleep. And so the fact that they want to be involved in that, I love it. I love the opportunity to have them there with me.
Yeah.
I'm crewing for Steve Smith this Saturday for the EX100, and I haven't asked Arthur yet, but I have a feeling that he's going to want to come crew with me and Steve's wife, Kim. And as on one hand, you're like, oh yeah, these things would be like, you as a parent, you like, and it's just like, I'm just going to have to say yes. Like if he asks me to come, I'm just going to have to say yes, because I want him to be able to have that experience. And I had a similar conversation, like you said, like kind of laying into team or your kids about attitude recently. We've been doing a lot with karting kids everywhere, and I'm happy to do that. But I told my kids recently, I was like, unless your attitude changes, I told one of my kids, I said, I won't pay for like any more of, whether it's bike races or like stuff for football. And I'm like, and you're going to owe me the entry fee back. It hasn't started yet. If you don't shape up, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that was the one thing that I had said recently about attitude and behavior that actually I felt like it clicked. And not that I want to be threatening my kids, but it's that family culture, right? Of like this, I am not here to be your snack and, chauffeur. Like I'm happy to do those things, but I also have things of my own that I need to do and are equally important.
I think open dialogue with kids is huge, because it will help develop them and turn them into adults that are not afraid to have open dialogue.
Right.
Right. And they can handle a conversation. They can actually converse with somebody. Your kids are great. They're interactive. Cable can interact with people. Gavin can. But to your point, I mean, I'm right with you. Like, I've had similar, or Stacy and I've had similar talks with our kids that, I said, hey, we're not putting ourselves up here as the omniscient power in the house, right? You're not subservient to us. We don't roll that way. The family culture is, we're on the same level. But what that means is you're not going to play the role of the helpless child that can't do anything, yes. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody, there's a give and a take. There's a yin and a yang here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to be at my level, but you are on a journey to get to that level.
Yeah.
And the expectation is that you will arrive there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it rolls.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're clear and it's not judgmental and you're always sharing with them that I'm doing this for you.
Yeah.
Not to you.
Right.
This will serve you down the road. You can't even fathom how. Just trust us on this. And I think it works. I think it can work.
I also think when you have a kid who does these events, like I'm just thinking of Arthur, right? It's like, dude, I've seen you tackle the hardest section of the Margie Gessick. Mm-hmm. You can put your laundry away.
Right. Right. You can actually, instead of throwing your underwear next to your bed, you can carry it 6 feet to the hamper.
You actually can. And sometimes they need that reminder.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I just remember that finish being my favorite, like 3 out of 3, my favorite finish, Margie finished by far. And just feeling like so proud of him. And just that like he did it and we were there. It was amazing to watch that as his parent.
Oh, for sure. And
just, yeah, I feel like he's going to wear out his Margie hat. Like he wears it everywhere.
What's funny is when Caitlin and Brenton were just in here.
Yeah.
I had asked them, like, how have the events helped shape them or impact their lives off the bike outside of the events? And one of the things Caitlin said was that, you can take something now hard in life that's happening to you and be like, well, it isn't as hard as Mosquito Gulch, or this isn't as hard as Trail of No Return. So they get these reference points, right? And it helps put things in life in perspective, which is kind of what I heard you say for Arthur.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you did the mini Margie, which is the worst kids race in America.
Yeah.
You can carry laundry to a hamper, young man.
Yeah.
Right. But, in a more realistic way, he's going to have challenges he'll face in life as he gets older, and that are, tough moments for him that he has to overcome something.
Yeah.
Get through something. And hopefully he'll be able to pull from the experiences he's had doing hard physical things.
Yeah.
And identify himself as somebody like, hey, I'm prepared for this.
Yeah. It already has. I mean, Arthur did, like the mini Margie was like beginning of his 5th grade year, And there's been moments in that school year, more than moments, that we've had that conversation, and he's had that perspective, and he doesn't much need the reminder, that like, hey, you've done like really hard things. But I think like as a parent, like you talked about like when your kids feel that you've got them.
Yeah.
Like I remember the moment we were climbing hills forever, right? Like there's so many hills. And Arthur looked at me and I knew he could push his bike up that hill. I knew he could do it. But instead, I hit the stem of his bike and I pushed both of our bikes up the hill.
Yeah.
And he got up to the top and he's like, thanks, Mom. And we just kept rolling.
Yep.
Then we got up somewhere else and, we kind of did this like hairpin, and you're out in Ramba and he was like, another hill, and he kind of like verbalized it out loud.
Yeah.
And there were some hikers behind us. One of them was actually carrying a LaCroix, which I was like very jealous of. I'm like, you're out here just like carrying a can of whatever you're drinking. And she looked at Arthur and she said, and we didn't know these people until race day. She's like, will you carry this? She gave Arthur her LaCroix, and then she pushed Arthur's bike up the hill. And I was just like so appreciative, and he was appreciative too. But so not only to like allow Arthur to like find his limits, but then to feel that support from other people.
Yeah.
And when we got up to Jasper Knob, we saw there's those like great pictures of Arthur and I looking in the the empty bucket,
Yep.
checkpoint bucket.
Yep.
We get to the top, and I had been a little bit ahead, just a tiny bit ahead of Arthur. There's that last little, climb up. And I moved over and let Arthur go up first. And I will never forget the look that he gave me. That was just like, yeah. And then like getting our checkpoints, flying down. And yeah, it was just so like that the support, like there's so many things about that 8 hours on the trail that extend far beyond the time on the trail. It's that like a lifetime of memories of just having support, feeling supported, and also doing something really hard, really challenging.
Yeah, there's a feeling of acceptance, that comes with it, and just being part of something.
Yeah.
Which is important for everybody, regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I had a question. Dang it. When you were talking, I forgot.
You should have just interrupted me.
I did have a question for you because she's got 3 boys. Stacy and I have 2 boys. What's it like raising 5 girls?
Come on over this weekend. They're going to be here. All of them, starting tonight.
I'm curious because, I don't want to broad brush here, but, boys, there is a developmental difference between boys and girls, obviously. I mean, we see it at Bike Club. I feel like a lot of times, especially in the younger age, let's say 5 to 8 and even 8 through, 12, 13, middle school, our female participants in Bike Club, they just seem to have a different level of maturity. And our younger boys just, cognitively, they're a little bit behind and they're kind of like squirrels. When we get bizarre behavior, it's about 9 times out of 10 out of our boys.
Yeah. I think raising girls, centered me,
Yeah.
There's just there's a protection level that you I think I gained that I maybe wouldn't have if I had boys, because I'd say, just get out there and be hard.
Yeah.
And toughen up.
Right.
Girls just naturally can take it. And they're smart enough they're smart enough not to do certain things. They have a bit more self-preservation.
Yeah. Here's a question. What I've noticed, there's a lot of attention that's given to trying to ensure that girls feel equal.
Yeah.
Or they're given equal opportunity. The interesting thing I've noticed, I'm just going to say in the cycling community, is an extension of that for me would be, I think that young women and young girls should be taught how to take care of their own bike. But I don't see it happen.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's, I guess I don't understand why not. Like, if you want them to be free of that dependence on a guy, why not, Dad, why not teach your young daughter to not need you to fix her bike?
Sure.
In my time, it's normally been like Dad's coming in like the hero. I'm going to fix the bike. Don't you worry about that, Sally. But I don't. Do any of the girls ride regularly?
They're starting to.
Are they?
Yeah, they were all runners. So
okay.
You teach them how to tie their
shoes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
How's that going?
I've got one coming up to do Margie this year. So
perfect. They all know how to tie their shoes. Then
they know how to. Yeah.
Check.
They were all runners. So but they're coming up this weekend to bike and scout out the mini Margie course for the run.
Yeah, that's good.
But we'll be biking predominantly, I think.
Yeah. Do they know how to take care of their bike?
We'll do some ABCs.
Okay. ABCD.
D. Drivetrain, yeah.
I would say I clean my own bike.
Yeah.
I clean it, wash it, chain maintenance, all the things. I bring it to the bike shop when it needs it.
Yeah.
I will share, and granted, being an adult woman is different than raising kids, but I came from a family of 4 girls.
Yep.
So raising boys is a very little different for me.
Yeah.
My mom has a hard time with me doing these races because I'm not someone who is not navigationally savvy.
Yeah.
Like if you say, oh, go west on Washington Avenue, I'm going to be like left or right, you know?
Yeah.
And so having that experience as someone who hasn't felt great with directions, to be able to go out in the middle of the woods and be the navigator feels really freaking good.
Sure.
Like it more than a lot of other accolades that I've had in my personal and professional life. Just having that skill feels really great. And I can only imagine how that empowering that would feel if I were Arthur's age at 11. The other thing that I at first was a little annoyed about, but I was actually like, oh, that's actually like a good thing. When I was getting ready for the Crusher Master 100 last year, you know, I had other friends whose partners were, you know, they had spreadsheets of like where they were going to meet them and all this stuff. And my husband's not a planner. It's okay. So I had just any of my extra nutrition stuff I threw in a bin. And I was like, if you happen to come and like find us on the course, like bring this with you. That's all I said. And I was kind of thinking like, wow, like, does he just not care? Like, why is he not coming out, you know, to like meet me somewhere? And he looked at me. He's like, are you serious? He's like, I've watched you prepare everything that you may possibly need. Calculate all of your calories and carbs and water. He's like, you don't need me to meet you out there. And I was like, oh, it's not that he doesn't want to be out there. He knows that I don't need him out there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I actually like that.
Yeah. I think actually what you just said there, that kind of going back to the question about girls and, you know, dads taking care of the bike and not teaching them to take care of the bike. It's along that line. So I think we have nearly 50-50 boys and girls in bike club. It's damn close.
Yeah.
It's as close as any sport that I can think of. Because, normally boys and girls don't play the same sport together. They're divided. So our program has damn near 50-50 boys, girls. And I've said for 11 years, if you want young women to feel like they can hang with boys and men, you need to put them in to the environment with boys and men because they will learn quickly that they can.
Yeah.
But the equivalent cost to that, or I'll say not cost, the investment that they should have to have in it is they're also going to have the same level of preparation and ability as the boys.
Yeah.
I think boys are maybe more inclined naturally toward the mechanical side and wanting to take care of bikes, and also there's some social expectations on them. But let's pull those out. Let's pull out the gender expectations and just say, if these kids are in a program together that is trying to develop more resilient, self-supported kids, I'm not trying to develop more resilient, self-supported boys or girls independently. It's them together.
Yeah.
The girls should have the same expectation. Like we want them to see they can hang with the boys and have that confidence to know they can, and they should be able to fix their bike.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I'm at on it.
One thing that I really don't like in the world of sport, specifically trying to make equal opportunity for girls or women, there's like these days where it's like National Women in Sport, or there's these like special things that are really targeting women, or I should say girls or women. And while I understand, being a female, I understand that some women may feel more comfortable, or girls may be more comfortable with other girls. But the reason why it's never sat right with me is exactly what you said, that in order to feel included with men and boys, you need to be around them. You need to be biking with them.
Yeah.
You need to be, and then recognizing that you're not like the International Women's Day in Sport. I really don't like that holiday, because I always say, like, in our household, in our family culture, if my boys were here and you asked them and said, like, have you ever thought that your mom's not as capable as you or your dad because she's a girl? They would be like, absolutely not. Because I show them every day that I am capable, and show myself, right? And so if we have to show, there's these things like, oh, maybe we, raise strong women and all. Yeah, but we also need to show boys that women are just as capable as they are, but you have to do something.
Yeah.
You can't just say it. You have to actually do it.
Yes. You need to live it.
Yeah.
They need to see it.
And we need more women and girls to do that, not just to say. And all of these holidays and campaigns, it's a lot of saying and not a lot, and it takes the focus off of the doing.
Well, there's a lot of initiatives, right?
Yeah.
And those initiatives are driven for a lot of very, I'll say, contrived reasons. They're not actually genuinely aimed at trying to accomplish what they're suggesting they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
They're pandering more often than not to try to gain, they're just, it's marketing.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't know how else to put it.
100%.
It's marketing. I'm a big believer that if you actually want to reach a level where it's sustainable and you can have a healthy, cohesive culture and community, you actually have to evacuate all of these special preferences, all these special days, and you have to have very set ground rules and expectations universally for everybody. And my God, I just described 906 Adventure Team.
I was just going to say that.
That's not where I was going, but I can tell you that I'm surrounded on a daily basis by hundreds and thousands of people within our community that the only thing I really know about them is that they're aligned with our values, our goals. They appreciate what we do. They participate at some level in bike club or volunteer or in the events. I actually don't know much more about them than that, except that they're a human that's on the same planet at the same time as I am. I don't know much about their wife, their kids, their political alignment, where they stand on important issues. And frankly, I think that is the very reason why I can get along with just about anybody.
Yeah.
Because I don't see beyond the fact that you're a breathing human in front of me. And that's all I need to fucking know about you. I don't need to know anything else to value you or to treat you a particular way. I, frankly, cannot like you. You could be somebody who has, behind my back, attacked me, said shit about me, and I can know it. But when I see you, I'm going to treat you decently.
Yeah.
And that's what we should. The reason that I can do that is there's core values, there's some character attributes, and there's also understanding that if somebody's done something bad to you or if somebody doesn't see things the way you do, highlighting that and making that a point of contention is doing nothing positive.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to agree to disagree.
Yep.
And look beyond that to find something else you have in common. And the commonality is we're breathing the same air.
Yep.
At the same time.
On the same planet.
And we both deserve to have as good a human experience as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
Again, here we are overcomplicating.
Right. Decomplicate, simplify.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously I'm hugely biased when it comes to our youth program. But I think the proof is also just, as they say, the proof's in the pudding. Mm-hmm. You look at, we're organizing right now for Crusher because Crusher is 17 days away. And I'm working with Stacy, my wife. I'm working with Julie, I'm working with you.
Yep.
We're putting the pieces together for our volunteer crew. I don't know for sure, but I would bet if I were to go out, grab my laptop and pull up the numbers, that volunteer staff that's going to be helping us execute this event is either 50% female or more.
Yep.
Women have no problem leading within our organization.
Yep.
And I think a big part of it is because we've evacuated all these labels and different things that get in the way. But the most important thing we've evacuated from and somebody who's on the outside might not believe this because they see the social media, the way that we talk, they may perceive that as ego, or somebody might go onto my Facebook personal page and they might read something I write when I'm writing passionately about trying to help people be better. And they might be like, that fucking guy and his ego. But what we've actually evacuated from our organization and our events and our community is ego.
Yeah.
And when you can pull that out, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And you can get equal representation of all people.
It's interesting that you shared that about the ego piece. And this is going to sound the name of it may sound, or the nickname that I received from the Crusher events may sound egotistical, but it's really not. Eric Hannett gave me the nickname Boss Lady because
I've heard that before.
There was one, and it's kind of gotten, thrown around, but I actually really I feel like it's an endearing nickname, just because I was organizing things, right? But it wasn't said in like Boss Lady, it wasn't said in a derogatory name. Sometimes nicknames that say a man might give a woman who's bossy or is giving direction might be out of a point of might come from ego. And this is given in the best, just light and,
sure.
And it's kind of stuck. But yeah, that is interesting about the suffer crew and just the amount of people and females that show up. And, it's busy, right? When the events happen, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot that's happening. I also love when my boys see that, they see me volunteering, they see me helping out. Sometimes we're we've got a house full of groceries and supplies and things like that. And without them even having to ask, they know what's going on. They know, I'll be gone for quite a bit of time, but they also know that their dad's going to be there, and mom's got stuff going on, and she'll spend time with them when she can. And once, Crusher or Margie or Polar Roll, once that's over. And I love that that's why I feel like it attracts them to they want to show up and help me and help the race. And I hope that just continues I hope that they're, as they get older and can be maybe more helpful than not in some of those situations. I'm looking forward to continue to involve them if that's something that they want to continue doing.
It's interesting what you just said, because it popped a thought in my head where, I think that there's a lot of value that's placed within our organization and programming, whether it's adult events or youth events. There's a lot of value placed on being helpful versus the value normally being placed on winning.
Yeah.
Or, being the best. That's really downplayed within everything we do. And I think that may be part of what gives space to such a diverse community.
Yeah.
Is that we're saying that, the competitive aspect of it's great, but that's not where we're going to place all of our value. We're going to place our value more on everybody's ability and willingness to show up and be useful, helpful, and to serve.
Yeah.
There's just a sense of service, which I think then is also why you see our demographics tilting slightly more toward the female side of things, because there's studies out there. I can't reference one right now, but there's studies that clearly show that women do tend to be, they have some caretaking tendencies, service tendencies. Women get shit done.
Yeah.
There's less ego, generally speaking, dealing with women versus guys who, in a male-dominated environment, which most athletic organizations and experiences are, there's just a lot more ego and competition and negativity that we don't tend to experience. But if guys don't feel like they can show up and be the hero, then they tend to not show up.
Yeah.
So I think that's part, as we've grown the organization, or as we've evolved the organization, our demographics have changed. Because we were male-dominated in the beginning. The events were male-dominated, but it's slowly changing.
Yeah.
And I think it's positive.
I think I can speak to two things that I think has helped that. And I'm not saying that I'm the expert, but as an observer.
No, absolutely.
I remember hearing before my involvement in the events as a participant, and then also professionally, as a dietitian working with folks. I remember hearing, and I thought I was very curious and really liked the fact that there was kind of at one point unlimited entries for females.
Yep.
Because I ran road marathons, I did all these races, there's no preferential treatment, right? But that's but once that saturated, once the women came in and found these events, it wasn't this continued crutch or preferential treatment, right? Same thing. And there might be people, I mean, it always comes up with the buckle, right? The buckle time.
Yeah.
And
oh, goody.
right. Well, I'm just going to say that like, I think your stance, I think the welcoming of the women in the like, hey, we're going to try to get 50-50. Like, this is our goal. Hey, we're calling it out there. We want to get at least 50% of our field female.
Yeah.
You didn't just say that in hope that all these women would like fall into your race. You said, hey, we're going to let people in.
Yeah.
And then what women do is we talk, right? And if we have a great experience or we want to like do it with a friend, it brought more women in. And now we've got lots of women, which is great. And none of us are leaving. We're all like hooked, right?
Right.
And so, you know, that had to happen in order for those numbers to kind of, for that goal to be met.
Yeah.
But now it's not like, oh, the women, you get this like special start and we're going to like drop the we're going to like give you a buffer on the buckle time. Like, we don't want any of that. Like, let me speak for women.
Yeah.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
We don't want you to shrink it and pink it. We want the same thing as you do as men. That's what we want because it matters. We don't want like this special field or the thing. And I think that that's what helps with like, you know, that there's not like age group winners and it's like, you know, the first person gets a dollar bill and that's great. And you move on because so many things in life are this tit for tat hierarchy. And we're all just kind of, at least I am just sick of that. So it feels really great to be, you can't have community and expect the feeling of inclusion for women when you are setting different expectations for men and women.
If you want equal, you need to be equal. You can't choose equal.
Yeah.
You're either all in unequal or you're not. That's what I would say to that.
Yeah.
On the unlimited entries for women, the most unfortunate thing is that some women started gaming that system and they would actually go get that entry that we were making available for women only. And I have it set up so every time there's a transfer done, I see it.
Yeah.
I get an email. And all of a sudden, you know, I start seeing transfers come in from female A to male A. And at first I didn't think anything of it, but then it just started happening more and more. And it's like, well, that can't happen.
Yep.
Right. So there's gaming the system. I will say, I don't think that that's the majority of women at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I would not turn a woman down. If a woman wanted to get in, all she has to do is reach out to me.
Yep.
We're going to make it happen. It's just that we put a system in place that we felt worked. And then it, you know, like humans do, they start gaming the system, which is fine. So I think you're right. I think you are right that we've welcomed women in, we welcome everybody in, but it doesn't become like a campaign or a crutch.
Yep.
And on the buckle, hey, we didn't set the time in the beginning based on gender. We just literally said, we don't think anybody can do this in 12 hours. Anybody. We had no image of anybody.
0 people were imaged.
0 people were imagined. And that's what the standard that was put out. And I will not change it.
Yeah.
You want to beat me up? You want to say this and that about me? You want to come in and throw up the, you know, I'm a dad of a girl card? Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
You know, there is an oversensitivity, I think, on that side that is unfair. People like, I love Metallica. Okay.
My boys do too, thanks to you.
You're welcome. Thank God for those young men. I love Metallica. And what's funny is there's a group of guys out there who have daughters that they will see me get piled on and made fun of for liking Metallica or WWF wrestling too. Okay. They don't have any problem seeing people talk shit about me and my preferences. But I say one fucking thing about Taylor Swift one time. If I put a meme up about Taylor Swift, and I'm a joking guy, right?
Yeah.
I love to be made fun of, and I like to make fun of shit. So if I put a meme up about Taylor Swift, it's because I genuinely think it's funny.
Yeah.
I'm not punching down on women.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, please. Seriously. Maybe you need to go look in the mirror and look at your own sensitivities, Dad.
Yeah.
Because it's ridiculous. But those are the things, like, again, going back to this equal thing with women, it's equal or it's not.
Yeah.
Equal is equal. So somebody's going to get that 12-hour buckle.
They are.
And as soon as it happens, more women will get it.
And I may very likely be on the trail when that happens. I hope I'm at the finish line and I can be there, but I can't freaking wait. Like, I know there's women out there that it will happen, and none of them want that time changed.
Yeah.
They don't want, like, you're not going to go back and like, you're not going to, because if you change the buckle time, then there's going to be people that had like earned buckles before. You're ruining that accomplishment for them.
I'm willing to do the hard thing and to be the target for some people to shit on.
Yeah.
To hold that target for them to attain, because I believe they are equal.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to being equal, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you got to work towards something, like, there's people out there that can run a marathon in 2 hours. I fucking can't.
Yeah, I can't either.
And if I want to be at that level, there's going to be some intense sacrifice to get there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're either willing to do it or not. But, if I'm not willing to do it, I'm not asking anybody to lower the bar.
Right.
Or to make it easier for me.
And that's not going to make the accomplishment. I don't feel like that would make the accomplishment feel the same.
No. And this isn't a lack of sensitivity either.
Right.
At all. It's being willing to stand for something for people.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, going back to the, guy like with the Taylor Swift meme, like the dad, it's the hero mentality, right? Like, women are not fragile. We're not fragile. There's a lot of us that are really freaking strong.
I know but it fucking aggravates me, because you know what? Taylor Swift is amazing. What she's accomplished is amazing.
Yeah.
I put a meme up about her. It's not degrading women.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we that fucking weak and sensitive that you can't make a joke?
You're including her.
Yeah. I mean, some of these guys who get worked up about their daughters, they don't have an issue with, like, sometimes a middle finger is used, right?
Yeah.
Well, not sometimes, all the time. There's people who are offended by middle fingers.
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
But these guys, it's like people pick and choose what they want to be overly offended by.
Yeah.
And jump up on a soapbox about.
So we've been avoiding the middle finger conversation in our household. And we were out swimming with all the Crusher people, and my boys were there swimming. And so, of course, I'm like, hey, I'm going to take a picture and send it to Todd. And the whole crew flies the bird.
Yep.
So my older two kids fly the bird, right? And I'm just like, I'm not going to make a big deal about it, right? And then after that, every single time I went to go take a picture, my kids are like flying the birds. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what did I start here? So we're just.
Was this a couple days ago?
Yeah. Anytime I took out my camera, they're both like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, please. Like,
don't do that for grandma and grandpa.
I said, not at church. Don't do that at school. Like, we're just trying to.
But isn't there a lesson of time and place?
There is a lesson of time and place. And I think they were both just like, I think they thought like, Mom, let me do this. And it's like, well, I just didn't make a big deal about it. I'm hoping to like just kind of ignore it.
Time and place, context of use.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
These are things that are really, they're opportunities to teach kids.
They are.
Cable just brought up yesterday. I don't know how this came up. I think I said shit in some context. And he started lobbying that he should be able to say shit now because he's 14. And I said, well, explain your rationale to me. And he said, well, do you remember that time a few years ago at deer camp? And I'm like, not yet. Give me more information. And he said, do you remember the first time that you let me say crap? And I don't.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, yeah. What was that like? And he was like, that felt so good, Dad. I said, but you don't run around saying crap all the time. And he's like, well, no, I'm only going to say it when I'm at deer camp. So he picked up on it, right? But now he's trying to lobby to say shit, which of course I shut down and said no. Yeah.
Well, I was just shutting down. Titus has said something sucks. And I'm like growing up with four girls, like my dad, just like we were just not allowed to say that word. So I was like, dude, like I have to keep having to remind him, set the precedence, right? And he's thinking like, oh, there's worse words I can say, right? And it's like, yes, that's true. But we also we don't just need to, you can say something else. Like saying something sucks is kind of like you're being lazy about your words. Like say something.
Oh, for sure. That's like easy button. I don't want to articulate my thoughts or my argument here or what I'm thinking. I'm just going to tell you suck.
Yeah.
But it is.
Well, he wasn't saying that I sucked.
That would be a different conversation. But, when you do these things, middle fingers, context, in this scenario, maybe it's being used as a joke. In this scenario, it's being used to incite, anger or to convey something different. Having kids actually understand the difference in that spectrum of meaning.
Yeah.
instead, what adults do now is they just like to say, no more middle fingers.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
Well, no. No.
Well, and it's interesting that, so my boys are 11, 9, and 5. And each of them on separate occasions this school year has gotten a phone call home for saying or doing something that they didn't understand what they were repeating.
Yep.
And so that brings to your point, right? Like if they understand, what these words mean or what my middle finger means, right?
Yep.
Then they can understand the time and the place for it. Whereas if you did that to my 5-year-old, he would fly the bird right back because he's like, I have no idea. I'm just going to copy you. Like this is this. I think I'm trying to be included in whatever you're doing.
Parroting.
Yeah. So that, but then it doesn't help when it is kind of funny, right? Sometimes when kids say these things that they don't understand or don't mean,
sure.
And older brothers, like raising 3 boys, like older brothers sometimes can set a poor example of just they're laughing and giggling because it is kind of funny.
Yeah, parenting's hard, if you haven't heard.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone through this with Gavin too, because, Gavin's 21 and, he feels like he's beyond 18.
Yeah.
So, his thinking is, well, I can say whatever I want. And it's like,
Yeah.
When you're within our home where your 14-year-old brother is, again, going back to this understanding of context and, parroting.
Yeah.
No. I mean, if you want to have complete autonomy, pack and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Find a place. My husband's a big button pusher joker, and his friends all make inappropriate jokes and whatever. And sometimes it's doesn't remember that oh, you're not with a bunch of your friends. So every once in a while, the that's what she said, will get dropped.
Oh, yeah.
And I finally had to tell my husband, you got to stop, because the boys were just saying that to whatever. And sometimes
random stuff.
Yeah. But sometimes it was actually made something sound real dirty. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Oh God, that comes up a lot. We'll probably hear that a lot at Crusher weekend. So kids, cover your ears.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am kind of mindful about okay, what situation, not that I'm trying to shelter my kids, but there are situations we told the boys that night when we were all hanging out, we were what happens in the lake and the sauna, stays in the lake and the sauna, because, they were going to be flying the bird everywhere.
Time and place, context. All right. What time we got here? Because I think we got, a little bit after 12. We got a little bit of time. We got Nicole coming in.
Okay. And I got to roll about 12:30.
Yeah. So, all right. Self-supported, what are you calling it again?
Kid.
Self-supported kid.
Yep.
Nutrition guide.
Yep.
When is it out?
It's going to be out soon. My back kind of threw a wrench in getting things out. I was hoping yesterday.
Okay.
That's
so soon is a week or two?
Yep. Yeah. I would say a week. My goal is to get it out and think of it as less. There's going to be information. Yes. But I want it to be more of a workbook that kids can use, parents can use. I do a lot of being the middle woman between when I'm helping kids and when I'm helping parents. Sometimes they just need someone to say hey, this is where we need to be with whether it's day-to-day nutrition or whether it's, event nutrition.
Yep.
And so by using my experience with, volunteering and then with my own kids out on the trail, just thinking if I put my dietitian brain and my mom brain and adventure brain together, what would that look like?
Yeah.
So lots of opportunities for kids to be able to voice their preferences. And then also I feel that will help some of those parents that are kind of we get kids who show up to Bike Club with Gatorade Zero and beef jerky.
Yeah.
And those are fine if you're not biking.
Yeah.
But when you're biking for 2 hours, you need some carbs.
Yep.
You need a granola bar, some fruit, applesauce, fruit snacks, something like that. Yep. And they actually need the sugar in the Gatorade.
You should put something together next year for Adventure Bike Club.
Yeah, I will.
As a guide.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
That might be helpful as part of the onboarding process for parents, because it's clear by, as you said, looking at what the kids are bringing to the ride, that some education would be beneficial. And
I see a little bit of a trend in popular diets. Yeah. So because protein is kind of king right now, we see, the I think those are the snacks or the things that parents are maybe thinking are best for their kids.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these choices from the adults are made with really great intentions,
Yeah.
but they're maybe missing a little bit of education on like, hey, my kid actually needs something more or needs something different.
Yeah.
And there's also, a big emphasis on like sugar, and like sugar is actually like carbs is sugar, and your body actually really needs that and prefers that when you're riding.
Yeah.
And if that's going to prevent, I mean, I wish I could like take a video of like myself bonking the last time it happened when it was horrible and I was sitting by a rock crying, or like say Cable when he was like if you think about experiencing a bonk with your kid, I would much rather them eat sugar than to go through a bonk. Like it could happen, sure. Right? But
no doubt.
Sometimes as parents, everyone's just trying to do their best. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a little bit of miscommunication between what an adult needs to maintain or lose weight and what an active kid needs to grow and to perform their best.
No doubt. Lots of bad information, misinformation, or lack of information.
And I feel like if we just touch on older kids for a little bit, I'm trying to think of what age, maybe like 8th grade through high school. I feel like the supplement companies are really pinpointing that age population for certain supplements. So I know I've been getting a lot more questions about, should my kid take this? Should I take this? And so kind of working through, I work a lot with some parents and some kids as far as like, well, what are you hoping to get out of taking this particular supplement?
Yeah.
Can we get that from food? Are you meeting your other nutritional goals? Like, are you getting enough calories and hydration and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Supplements. I don't use much.
Yeah.
Creatine's the only real daily thing.
Yep.
And then, when I'm riding or doing endurance type stuff, some sort of, scratch or carbo rocket, and then electrolyte replacement. And that's about it. Mm-hmm. I have tried like some of the pre-workouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That stuff just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I shouldn't take that stuff.
I worry. I've never taken it, but my concern has been about like my heart history.
Right.
I've just never taken one. I've been taking creatine for over a month now.
Did you have any weight gain from water? Do you know?
I don't weigh myself.
Oh, that's right.
So yeah, I might, but I don't know.
That's the only you do retain some water.
Yeah. And that's the metabolism of like creatine pulls it into the cells. Yeah. And it's actually interesting because I forgot to mention this when I was here last. It can actually, taking creatine and not monitoring your hydration. I was just talking to a mom whose high schooler wants to take creatine. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, how much water are they drinking? Mm-hmm. Because you really have to be mindful, again, the risk of dehydration. Right. And then when you're taking creatine, it pulls the water into the cells. So it's not available for normal digestion, absorption, things like that.
Right.
So I was like, I'm not trying to say, you don't want to sound like threatening, but like if you were willing to let them take creatine, we talked about like what are good places to get it from, dosage, all that jazz. Yep. But to say like, hey, I really think from a safety perspective, you need to talk about like hydration needs to be where it's at and it needs to be consistent before then you're bringing in creatine, especially when it's hot and humid like this.
Yeah. And kids are not generally good at hydrating properly.
They're not. And
they think they are. Yeah. But they're not.
Like the 500 milliliters of water in 8 hours.
No, we go through that with Cable all the time. And they don't even know.
Yeah.
Until it's too late.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally agree with you on that, with especially creatine. Like, I didn't really start dabbling with it until I was in my 20s.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's good. That's where I'd keep.
But like I said, I do think with social media and stuff like that, I think they're hearing about these things more. And I do think, like going back to the piece, like it's marketing, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're trying to get these kids, and
they're just trying to sell products.
And unfortunately, like I've had the honest conversation with some parents where I'm like, well, depending on how badly your child wants to take this thing, you can decide to provide it for them and get, talk about these guidelines and talk about like what's safe and know what product they're taking. Or unfortunately, like sometimes kids will get it from friends or they'll buy it themselves, and it maybe might not be what I would recommend.
Yeah. Even that's a support for just having open, direct conversations and dialogue, and knowing, like, I'm actively working out with the kids. I know you're actively working out with your kids. So that opens up lots of conversations where it's unlikely like Cable would get anything from somebody at school because he'd be like, Dad, like somebody tried to give me this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah.
While we're working out, I'd be like, no.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you allow those things, allow them to have those things. And I will say, I'm like you too, like I don't take a lot of supplements besides creatine, use hydration products for electrolytes. And the one thing I would say, like there's like a big trend in like the high carb, the liquid sources of carbohydrate. So like Carbo Rocket and super high carb. That's one thing that it's not super palatable. Like as adults, we can get behind it because we're like, it's really efficient from a carbohydrate standpoint. I feel like that has less application with kids. Like I wouldn't be recommending kids to use that. They're going to do a much consistent job of fueling if they're getting like, fruit snacks and candy and, granola bars and dried fruit and stuff like that.
Yeah. Cable tried a lot of those drinks and, it just, for whatever reason, isn't palatable, at least for him.
Yeah.
Or if it is, it doesn't last long. And then he's sitting with 3/4 of a bottle of something he doesn't want.
Yeah.
So, we went more with straight water or Gatorade. He will drink Gatorade.
Yeah.
And then whole food. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. We better wrap her up and get rolling.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Until next time. Bye-bye.